everybody. I'm here today with Jorge de los Rios and Monica Bonnett from our affiliate in Colombia, Posse Herrera Ruiz. Jorge de los Rios is the partner and head of the cannabis practice group at Posse Herrera Ruiz, and Monica Bonnett is also a part of that group and a lawyer in the IP group as well. Welcome, Jorge. Welcome, Monica. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Mario. How you doing? Thank you for inviting us.
Hi, Mario. Hi, Jorge. Thank you very much for this nice opportunity to talk about cannabis in Colombia.
Thanks, Monica. I also want to say that Monica is the co-chair. Monica and I are co-chairs of the Meritas Latin American Cannabis Practice Group, where we lead several initiatives to stay on top of new regulations and new legislation in the region. So Monica and I have a couple of years of working together as well, and I'm really happy that she's joining me on this episode. Jorge, I'll start, and Monica, you feel free to provide some input or ask questions as well as we get going. Jorge, what's the current state of legalization of cannabis in Colombia? Where are things today?
Okay, I'm going a little bit back on 2016 when all the legal regime started for the legalization of cannabis just for medical purposes. At that time, that was quite revolutionary, let's say somehow, and this triggered a lot of interest from investors in order to see a very prominent future industry where several significant investments took place. Today, we have to say that because of different obstacles, the industry has been advancing at a very low pace. We are now close to have a new decree that has the purpose of facilitating and removing some of the obstacles that the industry has. This has been a very controlled industry so far by different stakeholders, and all this has been creating not the development that at the beginning we expected to have. No, all licenses and permits take too long, and not only that, but also there are a lot of contradictions among the different authorities, and all this have produced a lot of uncertainty within investors. So just to be brief, we are still having a legal industry in Colombia. We're still having a lot of interest on developing this new industry. We see a big and huge potential of the industry in a country like Colombia, but we need the political will to create here a value-added industry that provides opportunities not only internally, but also in terms of innovation and creating products that will benefit the community in general.
And Jorge, just to understand a bit, is medical cannabis legal in Colombia? Like, can patients access medical cannabis? Is adult use cannabis, what's sometimes termed recreational, is that legal in Colombia? What's the status of those markets?
So the legal regime only validates cannabis for medical purposes. Yeah? So there's no possibility of having recreative uses or industrial uses. However, that's the kind of discussion that we're having today, because our current situation in Colombia for creating medical products in Colombia, the limitations are too high. Of course, it's not impossible, but it requires a lot of investment and development. This our country is more a rural agricultural country. So here we have a big opportunity not only on creating new jobs, but also on developing an agro-industrial industry for cannabis. And restricting this just for medical purposes will eventually limit or restrict its development. So, and if we make also the comparison with other countries, neighboring countries, where they are discussing on the possibility of having cannabis for industrial purposes, those countries could be more attractive for investors. So part of the discussion that we're having right now is one, opening the scope on what kind of uses cannabis could be used for. And industrial uses are definitely a big opportunity as well, because there are several studies that has acknowledged the potential of using cannabis, the different parts of the plant, for different industries, not only medical industries.
Just a clarification, just to add to Jorge's intervention, is that few years ago, in 2019, there was a legal act. It was Legal Act number 2 of 2009, which was allowing the use of cannabis just for medical purposes. That was like the um, initial step of our legislation. Thereafter, in 2017, a decree 613 was issued with all the regulation for cannabis. The problem is that that decree didn't have other uses different from the medicinal, like Jorge said. But in the reality, day by day here in Colombia, there are some authorities like INVIMA, which is the regulatory authority, which is allowing other kind of uses, like the one is cosmetics. Cosmetics are not medicines, are cosmetics, you know. So um, there is like a problem in between there, because there is like a second use, which is the industrial one, in which cosmetics are classified. So right now in the new decree that is coming up, hopefully this June, modifying the decree 613, probably we will have a new use, which is the industrial use further to the medicinal one. But of course, we will not have, and this is not in project even for the government in Colombia, to have recreational use.
Understood. And so if I'm and I think I understand it, but currently now a licensed producer of cannabis in Colombia could produce the flower for medical use, but the stalks or other things that could be used for fibers or for other industrial uses, that's not permitted?
Today, no.
No.
Today, no, and we are trying to correct that through the decree that is coming that Monica just mentioned.
Okay. So let me ask you, Jorge, as well. How did Colombia get to, I guess, from 2009, which Monica mentioned, or to 2016, where we had, or where a law was passed allowing for the several licenses that are available in Colombia? And maybe, I guess, let me back up. What licenses are available in Colombia, and how did that law come to be passed? And a bit of sort of context is that I've seen and I've had several episodes where some places have legalized, it's a referendum, people straight vote on it. Some governments have been elected with that mandate. Some court intervention has caused legalization. So I'm a bit of curious to know how Colombia came to find itself with a legalized regime for medical cannabis.
Okay, so but this we have to go back to the Santos administration. Basically in the Santos administration there was an interest of acknowledging that cannabis could be beneficial uses, mostly related to medical uses, and was in that administration where the government acknowledged this reality, aiming at different different purposes. One is acknowledging a trend that was taking place globally, in many countries, and we wanted to be visionary on developing an industry where, because of our geographical location, we have some advantages in terms of climate, in terms of reducing violence internally. You know, Colombia has been hit for decades because of illicit drugs, and this was like a first step on the direction of maybe finding opportunities rather than restrictions, and continue with the criminalistic approach that we have been doing. But that time, we enacted the legal framework of a nation industry just for medical purposes we discussed before. This was a very important step for this new industry that created a lot of attention from the private sector, and not only from big companies but also from small communities of growers that found here a big opportunity for developing an economic activity. Within this, just let me give you a few figures just since then, approximately we have more than 600 licenses that have been approved. So this uh, shows the interest that was produced within investors. As well, more than $400 million have been invested in different scale. Here in Colombia, you find from vertically integrated companies that has been in all the different parts of the value chain, and also some others that have been focusing in different activities. Here you will see a new change, because at the beginning the possibility was you need to do all the activities, and this, from the economic point of view and from the logistic point of view, demand a lot of resources. To respond to your question, in Colombia, we have four sorts of licenses. One is for the production or manufacturing of products. The other one is for the use of the seed, and so yeah, for the use of the seed, and the other one is for cultivation or growing plants with psychoactive component, and the other one is for growing plants without psychoactive component. Those are the four licenses that are required. Most of them are granted by the same authority. There's just one, the one of manufacturing, which is granted by the Ministry of Health, and the other three are granted by the Ministry of Justice. On top of that, you have the quotas that you are allowed to produce. And this is also kind of burdensome for the industry. I don't know. I will stop there, and I don't know if Monica would like to add something else.
Well, Jorge, thank you very much. Probably that in Colombia, the system of the quota is necessary to have a license, but if you have a license without a quota, that's nothing. You need the quota to have the license. The big problem that the industry has been facing during those 4 years, during the first 4 years of the legislation, is that quotas are granted years after probably you have a license. So sometimes you have a license, but you don't have a quota, and quota takes a lot of time to get
Who's granting the
the
quota?
approval. The quota is granted by the Ministry of Defense. Yes, so you have to apply for that, but you need a license to apply for a quota. So the problem is that that is one of the problems the new decree is trying to solve, to have like a more expedite and efficient process of quota. Because if you don't have a quota, even though you have the license, you can't produce. So that's a big problem we have here, or we have been facing here in Colombia during the last
So
years.
just to illustrate what Monica is saying, with the license, you are able or you have the capacity of producing. However, for that, you need also the quota that said you are able to produce this quantity. If you don't have that, all your manufacturing processes are stopped, and the coordination between those two permits has are a big obstacle today,
So
within others.
you would be, and this is just make sure I understand it because it seems awkward. You'd have a license to cultivate or to produce, but you couldn't actually begin until you got the quota.
Yeah.
That's true. That's what's happening right now. That is quite inconvenient for the industry because most of the time they can't start operation without a quota. So that's a very big problem. That's one of the reasons I believe the industry is like on hold and everything is going very slowly. Since the pandemic started here in Colombia, like the Ministry of Defense started to be like all the entities, like all the Colombian government entities started to work through the platforms, but that was not something that they were used to do. So that makes a big backlog in the issuance of the quotas. And we hope with the reactivation we are starting today. This is the first day of the economic reactivation in Colombia in this scenario of the pandemic. We hope that the entities started to be more efficient and to issue in a more efficient and short period of time the quotas.
Yeah, and that really leads to the sort of next and final question, and I think both Monica and Jorge, you guys have identified bottlenecks, let's call it, or issues. So, what changes do you see? Do you either or both of you see coming with a new law? If there's going to be a new law tabled and hopefully passed, what are the key things that you think may be in there or should be in there?
I don't know, Monica, if you want to go ahead or.
Yeah, sure. One of the first things that's going to be changed with this new rule is the use. So, because in the reality, there are some industrial uses that are like approved, like the cosmetics health registrations before INVIMA, which is the health authority. That is going to be recognized in the new law. Yes, the industrial uses. So we're going to have medical use and industrial use. That's the first thing. We have another resolution that on April of last year came up and was regulating or is regulating the free trade zones of cannabis, and also that cannabis that are up to 0.5 of active THC ingredient. That is considered like a controlled substance. Probably that is going to be included in that new law too. And there are a lot of aspects between all the experience that is like a result of the experience we have within the last 3 years since 2017, like the problems we have with the quotas and the licenses and all the persecution of the obtainment of these two permits. Probably that decree is going to have some new regulations that will facilitate and will make easier the obtention and the prosecution of the quotas and licenses too. There is another third component that is very important in that decree, and is the vigilance. Once you get a license and a quota, and you are like operating the industry of the cannabis here in Colombia, you have to update with some information to the authorities. But in the last decree that is still remains in force, it was not clear how does the authority do that. How can they keep tracking on that? So right now in the decree, it seems there are like steps and mechanisms and also platforms in which that information it has to be uploaded, and mechanisms for the authority to keep tracking on the activities too.
Thank you,
Okay.
Monica. Jorge?
I would like to add something. One of the big changes that this decree is considering is to remove the prohibition of exporting the flower, the dry flower, for commercial purposes. This prohibition represents a big limitation for the development of the industry. Remember that at the beginning I was saying that because of the geographical and economic situation of a country like Colombia, developing an agro-industrial industry for cannabis is a big opportunity in terms of employment, generation of employment, in terms of diversifying exports, in terms of competing with our neighbors. Countries like Ecuador, Peru, Uruguay, or Mexico are considering in their legislation the possibility of exporting flower with commercial purposes. And if Colombia remains with the prohibition, of course, this will represent a big hit against the development of the industry in Colombia. Another points important to address, I don't know if through regulation, and I think are more of public policy, are the necessity. I mean, for instance, the industry has been facing high restrictions, like the possibility of having access to financial services. You know, the financial sector is not willing to facilitate that development of the industry. Many of the companies, just for open a bank account is a big mess, you know. And likewise, this has several things to do because of how the industry is perceived in other countries like the United States, for instance, where the treatment is not homogeneous. Another big point to address is the political willingness to find in this industry a source of important opportunity for the country. We have the legal framework, which somehow, I mean, needs to be improved in some aspects, but it acknowledged the legality of the industry. However, the willingness of the authorities has not been what we were expecting, and this is also a huge blocker for the industry. So if we change that state of mind, and if we facilitate from the pragmatic point of view different and simple aspects like having access to financial services, finding opportunities instead of increasing controls, the development of the industry could be prominent.
And just to wrap up, when do we expect to know what finally will pass in that law? Like when will we know what has made it in and what's not, and when it will be in force?
Well, it is supposed that the ministry will issue that new rule within the next few weeks. We hope at the end of June we will have a new rule. It was expected to have it at the last June of last year, but because of the pandemic, everything was put on hold. But we expect it will happen the next weeks.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you very much, Monica. Thank you very much, Jorge. I want to follow up with you both in a few months and see how what new changes made it and how that's impacting the industry.
Thank you very much, Mario. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much,
very
Jorge.
much, Mario.
Thank you.